let's drink some whiskey. It's August at the Slow Whisky Club, and this month we've gone back to Scotland. Now in July, you might remember that we tried some whiskey from Ardnamurchan. Ardnamurchan is a newer distillery in Scotland. It's situated on the beautifully rugged west coast, and they make a very coastal, oily, a little bit smoky style of spirit. It's beautiful. For me, it is the Springbank of the future. I'm claiming it here. But for this month, we are going a little bit more classic. It's an oldie but a newie all in one, and a distillery that personally I'm very excited about seeing the revival of. But August is all about Tormore. Now, for those of you that have driven up to Speyside from Edinburgh or Glasgow, you'll drive up the A9, and at one point the A9 you'll take a turning to the right, and you'll go onto the A95 and you'll start seeing signs for the Speyside Trail. And then looming up ahead of you on the right, you'll first see the old distillery workers' cottages, and then you'll see Tormore Distillery standing tall, almost alpine-esque, amongst just a field of green and forests as far as the eye can see. For me, Tormore marks the beginning of the Speyside Trail, and it is a slightly newer distillery within Speyside. It was built in 1961, and actually if you look at the architecture of the distillery, you'll note that it is quite different from a lot of the others in the area, built more in sort of the 1890s. For a lot of its life since 1961, Tormore has been seen as a little bit of a secret weapon by blenders. It's been going into some of the world's best blends. Previous to 2022, when the revival happened, I'll speak about it in a minute, it was owned by Pernod Ricard, Chivas Brothers, and it was going into Chivas, Ballantine's, the list goes on. Now, I started my whiskey career at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and I remember presenting single casks from Tormore back in 2011, and we used to have the most amazing single casks. I used to love presenting Tormore, not only because I loved telling the stories of the little quirky elements of the distillery. For instance, they have a clock inside that every quarter of an hour chimes a different Scottish tune, and they have a lake outside that has been designed to freeze over in the winter so that people could go curling on it. But I loved presenting Tormore because of its thickness, its character, its elegance, but also its complexity. And it was a whiskey that really stood out whenever we did a tasting lineup. In 2022, the distillery was bought by Elixir Distillers, by Sukhinder Singh and co. And when they bought the distillery, they've really turned it on its head. Now, the first job when you buy a distillery, of course, is to go through the inventory that you have. And that's where Polly Logan, the distillery manager, has really come into play. She's gone through all of the casks, figured out the distillery style, what casks have been laid down, what the wood policy was, and the condition of some of these casks. And over the last 4 years or so, there's been a huge study into bringing back what is affectionately known as the Pearl of Speyside. And just a couple of months ago, they finally came to market with the first 3 new releases from Tormore. And we are very lucky that we're going to be featuring 2 of them, and you have in front of you 2 of those to try with me today. Let's get stuck into them. So the first whiskey that we're going to have is Tormore Timeless. And I love this whiskey. It might not be like this for you today, but here it is boiling. It is about 30 degrees. And this is exactly the whiskey that I want to be drinking in 30-degree heat with a very large glass of iced water on the side. So Tormore Timeless has been matured in 2 different cask types. We've got a mix of bourbon, both first fill and refill, and also sherry in here. Sherry cask isn't specified, but I'm going to go with probably Oloroso, if I'm going to guess, like a finger in the air guess. How those play with the spirit is that the bourbon casks really amplify those white peach, apricot, pear, luscious, elegant, like floral notes that you find in the whiskey. And then the sherry cask should add a little bit of depth, a little bit of complexity, a bit more of a backbone, which keeps that finish nice and long. But it is really that perfect summertime style whiskey. Great neat, and distilleries say actually really, really delicious in a highball. On the nose, all of those notes that I just said are coming straight through. I don't know if you've had Fever Tree white grape and apricot soda, but this smells like that, and I can imagine mixed with that, it would be incredible. I'm also getting, so on top of those like white peaches, the pear, the sort of luscious vanilla cream character, I'm just smelling ice gems. I don't know if you remember ice gems, but this for me is ice gems in a glass, and it is glorious. I'm getting all of those notes, the white peach, the nectarine, the pear, the ice gems, the sort of the luscious vanilla, the spritz of lemon, all of those lovely sort of summertime characters on the palate, but they're just exemplified by the sherry cask. And that's where that sherry cask is coming through, almost like a creamy hazelnut character, and then a touch of salinity as if you've taken all of those fruits and you've just sprinkled a little bit of molten sea salt on top. Let's compare it with the Tormore 12. Love a pop. So as you know, I love to compare and contrast. I think it's a really good way to figure out how the distillery character weaves through all of those distillery expressions, that gold thread of flavor, as I like to call it. And it really helps you bring out different notes and nuances in each whiskey rather than trying it just neat by itself. That's why we do 2 pouches for the Slow Whisky Club, so you can really get to know a distillery and try 2 things side by side for comparing, contrasting, and just pure enjoyment of tasting, to be honest with you. What we're looking at with Tormore 12 is a whiskey that's been aged for a minimum of 12 years, because remember that age statement on the front of the bottle is the minimum age of whiskey inside. Doesn't mean it's better, just means that it's a number in play. That is a whole other conversation for a whole nother whiskey. And with Tormore 12, it's been matured in bourbon, cream sherry, and new American toasted oak casks. So let's break that down a little bit. With the bourbon, again, we're going to get those lashings of vanilla cream, a little bit of a citrusy note, toffee, fudge coming through on the whiskey. Cream sherry is a sherry mix of both Oloroso and PX in one, and I think both of those come through really well on this final whiskey. Obviously it's played in together, but those Oloroso notes give it this lovely nutty character, while the PX gives it a little bit more of a sweetness, like a fruitcakey note coming through. And then finally toasted oak, which should give it, and I've tasted it before, it does give it a little bit more of a spice. The way you can really tell though is by having your 2 whiskeys side by side and just bouncing between the 2, switching your mind on and thinking, what's the same, what's different, what's highlighted in one, what's highlighted in the other. So when doing that, the real lightness, sweetness, elegance, white, floral, Fever Tree soda in a glass comes through on this one. And with this, I'm getting a lovely toasted oak, almost like logs by the fire, not in the fire, but by the fire, freshly cut down in the glass. There's also a really lovely caramelized nut note, quite a bit of orange, as if you've got a Manhattan and just spritzed an orange twist over the top. And I'm getting also a little bit of like a caraway character, and almost like really good sourdough bread with lashings of butter on top. All of those notes are coming through on the palate. It is 46%. You can tell the slight change in percentage going up, but it is absolutely glorious. I would add maybe a couple of drops of water to this one, and I really think those orange oil, the like grilled peaches this time, those sorts of notes will really come through to the fore with a few drops of water. So there we have it, 2 new, elegant, very clean, complex, beautiful whiskies from Tormore. The Pearl of Speyside, recently launched by Elixir Distillers and in your Slow Whisky Club August drop. I cannot wait to hear what you think about these 2. I'm going to finish this glass now. Cheers.